I think this is the most important evidence concerning the fact that there is something wrong with the man from Stratford. Hi everyone, welcome back to Florio channel. I am Mary and I'm here to talk about, the great Florio. Okay, so hi guys, I am Mary and today, as I anticipated in the last video, we are going to talk about the man from Stratford. I have explained you in the last videos that Florio most certainly wrote Love's Labus Lost. I explained you in the last videos that Florio most certainly wrote Love's Labus Lost. The Shakespeare should be conceived as, I call it machine, but as a brand, as a group of people. First, because theatre in the Elizabethan era was done with collaboration, and because the same Florio wrote in his works that he collaborated. Okay, so now let's focus on Shakespeare, William from Stratford, the man that it is associated with the writer of this plays. I have done a list of pro and cons. Is there an evidence that shows that Shakespeare existed, that was real? Do we have proof and evidence that he was the writer of the plays attributed to him? And which are the cons? So the evidence that actually tell us that there are some problems concerning Will from Stratford. Before we start, I want to thank you because I think we almost reached 1,200 subscribers. I'm so happy and excited about it. You almost crashed Resolute Florio website, and there was such a huge numbers of people who connected to the website. Soon you will see my novel Resolute Florio at the French Embassy out, and check my social profiles, Instagram, TikTok, because I'm going to share important news about my historical novel very soon. But now, let's start with this William from Stratford. Many of you have sent me emails telling me, please make a video about the man from Stratford. Tell me your opinion about the man from Stratford. Because I've never actually told my personal opinion about Will from Stratford. When I talk about Shakespeare, I talk about Shakespeare as a group of people, and in these people, Florio has certainly an important role. But was Will from Stratford in this circle, in this brand Shakespeare, in this group of writers collaborating with each other? Was he really the major writer who collaborated with Florio, with Daniel, with Marlowe? Or he had a minor role and only later the plays were attributed to him? So let's find it out. Let's start with Francis Maray. Who was Francis Maray? Francis Maray was a writer, a churchman, and he published a book in 1598, a commonplace book, a sort of personal diary in which he wrote his personal ideas of the contemporary writers of his time. In this book, published in 1598, Francis Maray also cites Shakespeare. He cites Christopher Marlowe, Samuel Daniel, Edmund Spenser, and he also cites Shakespeare. And this is the first mention of Shakespeare ever done during his career. With Green and Nash in a Menaphon, we have an attack at the shake scene, at the Johannes Factotum, Florio. Here, Francis Maray writes about Shakespeare, the dramatist. And this is the first time we have a list of the plays written by Shakespeare, because until 1598, the plays that were published in quarto editions, they were anonymous. It was common It was pretty common that plays were anonymous. The majority of plays that were published during the Elizabethan era were anonymous. So this is not something strange, okay? It was pretty common. But with Francis Maray, we have the first list of Shakespeare plays. Let's read his words. Now I'm going to show you the document of Francis Maray in which he cites for the first time Shakespeare and the list of plays that he cites. The work is Palladis Tamia, and he cites Shakespeare as the most excellent in both tragedies and comedies. So this is a strong evidence that the name Shakespeare was linked to the works during the Elizabethan era.
As Plautus and Seneca are accounted the best for comedy and tragedy among the Latines, so Shakespeare among ye English is the most excellent in both kinds for the stage. For comedy, witness his Gentleman of Verona, his Errors, his Love, Labours Lost, his Love Labours Won, his Midsummer's Night Dream, and his Merchant of Venice. For tragedy, his Richard II, Richard III, Henry IV, King John, Titus Andronicus, and his Romeo and Juliet. As Epius Stolo said, that the Muses would speak with Plautus' tongue if they would speak Latin. So I say that the Muses would speak with Shakespeare's fine-filed phrase if they would speak English. As the soul of Euphorbus was thought to live in Pythagoras, so the sweet, witty soul of Ovid lives in mellifluous and honey-tongued Shakespeare. Witness his Venus and Adonis, his Lucrece, his Sugrid sonnets among his private friends.
This is a very important document because this is the first time someone cites Shakespeare as dramatist, as a poet. He also writes that there are the sonnets that were published only later in 1610. So Francis Maray writes that the sonnets were circulating among his private friends. And then we have the first list of the plays that were attributed to Shakespeare. So this is a very important testimony of Shakespeare as dramatist and as poet. Let's move on. Ben Jonson in Timber. In 1640, Jonson, a contemporary of Shakespeare, wrote an elegy for Shakespeare in which he praises his works and identifies him as the writer of the plays attributed to him. Jonson's acknowledgement of Shakespeare as a playwright is a significant endorsement. This is what he writes.
Remember, the players have often mentioned it as an honour to Shakespeare, that in his writing, whatsoever he penned, he never blotted out a line. My answer hath been, would he had blotted 1,000, which they thought a malevolent speech. I had not told posterity this, but for their ignorance, who chose that circumstance to commend their friend by wherein he most faulted, and to justify mine own candour, for I loved the man, and do honour his memory on this side idolatry as much as any. He was indeed honest, and of an open and free nature, had an excellent fantasy, brave notions, and gentle expressions, wherein he flowed with that facility that sometimes it was necessary he should be stopped. Sufflaminandus erat, as Augustus said of Haterius, his wit was in his own power. Would the rule of it had been so, too. Many times he fell into those things, could not escape laughter, as when he said, in the person of Caesar, one speaking to him, Caesar, thou dost me wrong. He replied, Caesar did never wrong, but with just cause, and such like, which were ridiculous. But he redeemed his vices with his virtues. There was ever more in him to be praised than to be pardoned.
As you can see, again, Ben Jonson describes Shakespeare as someone he knows very well. He was very close to Shakespeare. In this description, he describes Shakespeare in details that show that he was close to this man. Third, Shakespeare's name was on published works. Before Francis Maray made the mention of Shakespeare, the plays were anonymous. After their publication, the plays had the name Shakespeare, that sometimes was Shakespeare, sometimes was William Shakespeare, but before 1598 they were anonymous. After 1598, the plays started to have the name either Shakespeare's or William Shakespeare. The total number of plays that were published in quarto during Shakespeare's lifetime is 18. We know that with the first folio, only 1623, 8 years after Shakespeare's death, we will have the complete works published for the first time. But when Shakespeare was alive, only 18, almost, half of Shakespeare's oeuvre was published during his career. Now, theatre. Shakespeare was associated with theatre. That's 100% sure. We have documents, we have paper trails that tell us that Shakespeare was connected to theatre. He was an actor, he was a shareholder of the Globe Theatre, and his role as a businessman is well documented. So it is possible that he also wrote the plays that were attributed to him. Yes, of course, even if it would have been pretty hard to work as an actor, to be a shareholder, a businessman, and even write such a huge amount of plays. Just to make one example, Ben Jonson started as both actor and as a writer, and later he decided to give up the job as actor because he didn't have time. He didn't have enough time to both be a writer and an actor. So in the end, he chose the role of playwright. So to think that Shakespeare had so much time writing the plays, businessman, an actor, Jesus, you have plenty of time in your life. The Testament. People have written thousands and thousands of pages on Shakespeare's Testament. I won't say what you already know about Shakespeare's Testament. We know that he doesn't mention any book. We know that he doesn't mention anything concerning writing. This is actually not strange, because if you look at Ben Jonson's Testament, if we look at Samuel Daniel's Testament, they don't mention books in the Testament. John Florio does. John Florio in his Testament mentions about 400 books. In his Testament, John Florio mentions Queen Elizabeth, Queen Anne of Denmark. He mentions the Castle, Barnard Castle, Wilton Castle. You understand that this is a man who spent his whole life writing and with aristocracy. We don't have this with Shakespeare, but we have mentions of Harry Condell and John Hemmings that are the actors of his theatre company that work with him, and they were also mentioned in the first folio. So I think that's the most important point of Shakespeare's Testament. And the first folio, obviously, 1623, we have the first complete edition of Shakespeare's plays, 7-8 years after his death, in which he is mentioned as William Shakespeare, comedies, tragedy, and histories. Now, let's go to the cons. The bad side of the story. Education. We know that we are talking about a man from a rural area of England. We know education at all. I don't want to be snobbish, because I think that the greatest thing about English Renaissance was the fact that many people who came from a lower and a poor environment were able to get in contact with the aristocracy. Just some examples. Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe came from a poor family. Ben Jonson, when he was a child, he wanted to study, but his father forbidden him to study. John Florio is another great example. John Florio didn't come from a rich family. Despite his father was an erudite writer, they were poor. And John Florio had a chance to study for 3 years in Germany, in Tübingen, thanks to a scholarship that was given to him by the Duke of Germany. And this is how Florio, as a child at 10 years old, was able to travel to Bingen and to study there 3 years. Did Florio ever graduate? No, Florio never graduated. He never finished studies. Why? Because after the 3 years, scholarship was off. It was finished. His father didn't have the money to keep his son into Bingen to study. So Florio came back to Switzerland. Of course, we have traces of Florio's education, but mostly he was a self-made man. I think the most important problem concerning the education is the fact that we don't have documents that prove Shakespeare continued his education. For example, with Florio, we know that he just spent 3 years in Germany studying. But then we have his works, we have documents, we have letters that prove that Florio continued his studies. We have documents that prove that he had a huge library, that he was obsessed with books, with writers. We don't have these with Shakespeare. And now we come to the most shocking problem concerning the education of Shakespeare, because I think that it's not really about the middle-class family environment. I think the most important problem about Shakespeare is his daughter. Shakespeare's daughter, Susanna Hall, signed with a mark, which was a cross on official documents. This suggests that she was illiterate, and this is, in my opinion, shocking considering Shakespeare. People could say, well, you know, women rarely had access to education. It's not true. It's not true. Let's make another example with Florio. Florio's daughter, Aurelia, was his only surviving daughter. She was one of the first women to be a doctor in England. She worked side by side with her husband, James Molyn. Who was James Molyn? He was the surgeon of Queen Elizabeth I. And Aurelia Florio was an expert in both Latin and medicine. And she was so successful as a midwife. You know that during the 16th century, to give birth, pregnancy was very dangerous. Aurelia was so successful as a midwife, many women gave their children the name Aurelia as a honor to her, as a token of affection toward her and toward her talent. She also became popular as a witch hunter because she was hired and called to examine 10 women who were accused to be witches. So Aurelia also had a role as a doctor to examine 10 women. You understand the difference here. A woman who became one of the most successful doctors in England, working side by side with the surgeon of Queen Elizabeth I, and the daughter of Shakespeare, is illiterate. She signs with a cross. This is, I think, in my opinion, the most shocking thing. This is not excusable. Shakespeare, who writes in his plays about beautiful, brave, clever women, and his daughter is illiterate. I think this is the most important evidence concerning the fact that there is something wrong with the man from Stratford. Let's move on. Personal letters and documents. Before recording this video, I did a deep research about the personal documents and letters of Shakespeare. I read about 50, 60 documents concerning Shakespeare and analyzed them all. Of all these documents, there is no survival letter, manuscript, diary that can prove he was a writer. This is a problem that also Stratfordian have admitted. For example, Stanley Wells. Stanley Wells has confessed that there are gaps in the records of Shakespeare. He also notes that there are posthumous evidence, So there are evidence in the first folio, there is a reference in the Church of Stratford, but there is no contemporary document that says that William Shakespeare was the dramatist of Stratford upon Avon. Maybe someday something will turn up. I would love to read it actually, because I have nothing against the man from Stratford. My life doesn't change if tomorrow someone discovers a document that proves William from Stratford was the man who wrote the plays. I don't have anything against this man actually. But of all the documents that I have personally analyzed, family records, legal records, paper trails, manuscripts, they don't give a single hint that the man from Stratford was the writer of the plays attributed to him. And this is something strange. We could say, yeah, it was the 16th century. The Globe Theatre was burned down. We had the Great Fire of London. Many documents were lost. But even the most remote and innocent and minor writer of the era has a letter, has a diary, has a paper trail that tell us they were writers. For example, John Fletcher, Thomas Nash, Gabriel Harvey. I also checked Ben Jonson, obviously. I also checked Samuel Daniel, Edmund Spencer. Even minor writers have at least one letter, a document, a legal document that proves that they were writers. We don't have this about Shakespeare, and that's a big problem. So you could say, this was a guy who lived 400 years ago. It's obvious that we don't have documents. We still have documents about Dante. Dante lived before Shakespeare. So the fact that we don't have personal letters written by this man except 6 signatures is a problem. Even if it was just one book, one payment, nothing. There is no single evidence that tells us that this man from Stratford, beside his work as a shareholder, as a businessman, as actor, that he also was a writer. There is nothing, because the other documents that I saw, they were all connected to this, to the Globe Theatre, to him as a businessman, but not a single one that tells us, William from Stratford, yeah, he was a writer. No, there aren't. Yes, we have posthumous evidence. We have the first folio. We have the grave in Stratford. There are some problems for that as well, but okay, let that pass. But there is not a single letter that proves William from Stratford was a dramatist and was a poet. For Florio, we don't have many documents, but we have letters written by Florio, for Florio, that prove, first, that he was a writer, second, that he worked in aristocratic circles, that he was a friend of people like Edmund Spencer, Philip Sidney, Matthew Gwynne, Samuel Daniel, Ben Jonson. We also have his calligraphy, his beautiful calligraphy. I want to show you one of my documents that I have in my archive about Florio, just to show you how beautiful Florio's calligraphy was. Small, round, neat, elegant. It was beautiful, really beautiful. He truly never blotted out a line. But except this, for Shakespeare we have these 6 shaky signatures that, yeah, maybe there can be a proof that he rarely wrote. What is important, in my opinion, is not that you have a beautiful calligraphy. What is important is that there is a document that proves that you were a writer. We don't have this about William from Stratford. I hate when people say, but he was a genius. This actually means nothing, but because a genius is nurtured with education, with books, with the people who surrounded him, with whom he collaborated. We know this about John Florio. We know that Florio loved books ravenously. We know that Florio bought books, that people borrowed books from Florio, that he wrote letters, that he had a beautiful calligraphy, that he spent his whole life, 50 years of career, writing, collaborating in theatre. That he collaborated with Ben Jonson. We have a beautiful copy of Volpone, in which Ben Jonson writes about Florio as his loving father and worthy friend and the aid of his muses. What does this mean, guys? It means that Ben Jonson was Florio's closest friend and collaborator. And here I want to end this video by saying something very important. This whole authorship problem. Because I am with you in this. I'm not entitled and I'm not arrogant enough to think to know everything about Shakespeare. I'm trying to understand this story with you together. We are a community, John Florio Society, and this community is trying to decipher and to understand through John Florio, because this is something new, because if you go on YouTube, you find countless and thousands of videos about the man from Stratford. But the best way to understand this Shakespeare story and the man from Stratford is through John Florio. So the most important thing about the Shakespeare authorship and about this man from Stratford is that the key to understand this story is to look at Ben Jonson. When I think of Ben Jonson, I think that if I could go back in time, I would strangle him, really. Because it is so obvious that he was in this game. He knew about Shakespeare, the brand Shakespeare. He was into the group of writers, I am 100% sure about it. And he protected Shakespeare until the end. If you read his works, he does not only show that he knows everything about Shakespeare, but that he also good at hiding Shakespeare. And Ben Jonson was his closest confidant and his closest friend. Ben Jonson was also a master into making references to classic writers to hide the point he's trying to make. We have the proof in the first folio. So, to end this video, I want to say that I am most certain that Ben Jonson is the key to really understand the real authorship of Shakespeare. So, my answer to this video is, did the man from Stratford exist? Did he work in theatre? Yes, he was a businessman, he was a shareholder, he was an actor. But did he have a major role in writing the plays? I cannot tell you this because I don't have enough historical documents to tell you 100% that William from Stratford was the man that wrote the plays attributed to him. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this video? What do you think about the research that I did for you? I wanted to show you this video because I think that the best way to look at Shakespeare plays is through the lens of John Florio. I am challenging you to reconsider Shakespeare authorship question, taking into account the important role that John Florio had in shaping Shakespeare plays. Stay resolute. Bye.